Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. E. Sivanagi, former Director, National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality Management, and currently working as CEO, the Cultural Center of Vijayawada. Today, we will discuss on the module History of Tourism for the paper Tourism in India. You all know that tourism has its beginning in the travel. Man, since the origin, has settled for some time in the caves, caverns, and under the rock shelters. For gathering food, he moved from the caves to the plains. Thus, the travel for the first time has begun during the prehistoric times. During the Neolithic times, man has invented the wheel, and the wheeled cart has facilitated him a faster movement from one place to another place. Thus, from the sedentary life, he also migrated to one place to the other for collection of food and also agricultural purposes. During the megalithic or the Iron Age, the invention of iron has resulted in bringing rapid changes in the society. Thus, the early small villages have transformed into urban centers, and there is a wide network of roads, communications, thus facilitated the movement of people on a very fast scale throughout the world, and this has resulted into the beginning of travel. In the next and succeeding phase, what is known as the early historic period, throughout the world, people have traveled from one place to another for different purposes, not only for collection of food, but also for business and other purposes. So, this is the real beginning of travel. And during the early historic period, religious travel has also begun. To cite as an example, Ashoka visited almost all the places associated with the Buddha. Similarly, worldwide, in different countries, religious travel has its beginning, which gave way or paved way for the subsequent forms of tourism. The learning objectives of this lesson include knowing the history of travel worldwide, how people traveled from one place to other, and the development of tourism through the ages. The fascinating travel began from the earliest times onwards to explore new places and seek a change of environment. Nomadic people during the pre- and proto-historic period moved from one place to another place for their livelihood, and it was called as life travel. During the next phase, people traveled in search of economy, business, and pilgrimage. You all know the earliest riverine civilizations, namely Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and India, had their greatest civilizations flourished as early as 4th millennium BC. During that period, most of the travel was done on sea only. So, we have evidences that people from Indus have reached up to Mesopotamia or Egypt on the seas, and there are evidences that they have sailed on the ships, huge ships that were facilitated by high masts, etc. India and China enjoyed the reputation of being the countries of fabulous wealth, which really prompted people from other countries to visit these two countries in a very early phase. Early travel in India and China was based on trade and commerce. Those travels were undertaken by the travelers from all over the world for variety of reasons in subsequent periods. Travelers visited India in search of fortune during the early Christian centuries. We have evidences that Ptolemy, Pliny, they have traveled from Italy and Rome through seas to India. This trend continued and became more marked in course of time with the European travelers. The lands of the Mediterranean Sea witnessed a remarkable evolution in travel if we discuss something on the beginning of the travel as far as the West is concerned. Beginning in 776 BC, people flocked for every 4 years to honor Zeus through athletic competitions and national festivals. Olympic Games began as early as 776 BC, which provided stimulus for tourism as a major sport event. Greeks traveled to the Olympic Games and were housed in tented encampments, thus creating a tourism environment. The concept of inns started during the Olympic Games only. Greek inns provided little more than a night's shelter for the travelers, but they have also provided food and a little entertainment. Travel mainly for medical and health reasons also started during the same period. The Greeks recognized important elements in treatment of the sick. Hence, people started moving from one place to another place for just medical and other purposes. People also traveled mainly for business and healing purposes too. During the medieval times, there was a growth of travel for religious purposes throughout the world. Travel became an organized phenomenon for pilgrims to visit holy lands such as Muslims visit Mecca, Christians visit Jerusalem and Rome. Same is the case with Hindus and Buddhists and Jains in India. If we want to discuss something on the travel in the Middle Ages, we have to dwell some time on the early roads. Alexander the Great found well-developed roads in India as early as 326 BC when he invaded India. In Persia, all the cities and provinces were connected by roads to the capital city. Romans traveled to see famous temples and popular destinations offering Olympic Games, medicinal baths and seaside resorts, theatrical productions and festivals, athletic competitions and other forms of amusements and entertainment. The desire to travel created a demand for accommodation and other tourist services that came into being as early form of tourism. The Romans can be considered as the first pleasure travelers in the world. They traveled for a variety of reasons and enjoyed at the destinations associated with natural beauty, arts, music, and games. Travel for religious purposes was considered as a significant activity. Religious travels were largely undertaken by foot or horseback since there are no paved roads and travel was considered as dangerous during those days. Only rich pilgrims traveled by boat or horse-drawn coaches during those days. Religious tourism encouraged exchange of ideas and also fostered trade. On the other hand, it served as a powerful means of forging unity and understanding between people from different regions. The Grand Tour. It is very important milestone as far as the history of tourism is concerned. The Grand Tour was a traveler circuit of key destinations and places to visit in Europe, which is considered as the beginning of mass tourism. The wealthy, aristocratic and privileged classes traveled in pursuit of culture, education and pleasure. The origin of the Grand Tour can be traced from the Roman society that traveled to Greece in pursuit of culture and education and became popular in the 18th century AD. Much of the interest in the Grand Tour can be related to the Renaissance. The Grand Tour, centered on the mainland Europe, saw a growing link to knowledge and interest in the classics, art, and the appreciation of architecture. The Grand Tour also facilitated most of the elite to visit new places, thus gaining knowledge on the places that they have not seen, and they, by word of mouth, have prompted other people to take travel. This really gave a stimulus for travel during 18th century AD and caught what we call a momentum for traveling to new places. That is what we call a new beginning of the modern day tourism. The Renaissance marked the important stage in the history of travel. The reappearance of tourism in Europe followed the Italian Renaissance and the development of full-scale urban systems and network of roads. The tourists who were on the Grand Tour respected the learning, antiquities, and the social refinements of the old world. The 18th century is conventionally considered the golden age of the Grand Tour. It is followed by what we call the Industrial Revolution, which again gave a fillip for tourism as an industry. In Europe, it created the base for mass tourism. With the rapid growth of the wealth and education, the middle class, as well as an increase in leisure time and a demand for holiday tourism activities, prompted and promoted tourism and travel related activities. Robert Smart of Bristol, England, in 1822 began booking passengers on steamers to various Bristol Channel ports and to Dublin, Ireland, and he became the first steamship agent as far as the tourism is concerned. The first travel agents. As we speak on the beginning of travel agents, Thomas Cook comes to our mind. Thomas Cook began running a special excursion train from Leicester to Loughborough in England on 5th July in 1841, a trip of 12 miles which carried 570 passengers at a round trip priced 1 shilling per passenger. Cook's company started providing escorted tours to European continent and later to the United States and around the world. The first specialist in individual inclusive travel was Thomas Bennett, an Englishman who served as secretary to the British Consul General in Oslo, Norway. He frequently arranged individual scenic tours in Norway for visiting British nobles. In India, the scenario is also the same. The advent of the Europeans into Indian continent again prompted travel from one place to another place, whether it is for business trip or administrative purposes. Thus, it gave rise to hill stations. The concept of hill stations has come during the 18th century in India as part of spending their vacation during the summer times. Thus, spots like Simla, Harsley Hills, Ooty, Kodaikanal, they became tourist spots particularly for the Europeans in India, which later day princely states have also taken up such tours to spend their vacation during the summer on these hill resorts. It is also very important to note that advent of railways in India prompted people to move very fastly from one place to another place, and that is in 19th century the real tourism activity began for very far away places, which was earlier it was very risky and dangerous to travel by foot and even by horse carts, etc. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the social, economical and technological changes have had an immense impact on the development of tourism in many parts of the world. Coaches were invented in Hungary and provided regular travel services in the 16th century. In England, as early as 1772, market boats started picking up travelers as well as goods on the canals. The first rail was started in England in 1825 and carried passengers in 1830 from Liverpool and Manchester, which featured special provisions for passengers. Another significant milestone in the history of tourism is invention of automobiles or cars. Those cars and automobiles in the early beginning of 20th century prompted people, particularly the rich people, to take individual tours on their own. This has got a tremendous impact on the development of tourism, and throughout the world people started purchasing cars, and they have used it not only for their personal purposes but also to visit vacation places, leisure pursuits, and other resorts in the cars. Motor car or automobile appeared in 20th century, and it has changed the travel landscape of the world. Henry Ford introduced his famous model car in 1908 in the United States. It slowly reached other parts of the world, and car travel became luxury in the beginning, and later on it became what we call a necessity. Beginning of the 20th century, that is around 1900, another significant achievement occurred, that is invention of air travel. First flights began from 1903 onwards as a regular scheduled air service, which started in Germany and known as Dutch Lufthansa. The first US airline, called Verne Airlines, was launched in 1926 and provided scheduled air mail services too. This achievement has further contributed for the growth of tourism throughout the world. Air transport was introduced in India on 18th February 1911 between Allahabad to Naini Junction. It was on this day J.R.D. Tata, the father of civil aviation in India, founder of Air India, took off flight from Dhurg Road Airport, Karachi to Mumbai via Ahmedabad. The scheduled air transport in India was started by the Tata Airlines in the year 1932, followed by other Indian operators. Introduction of railways has contributed for the growth of tourism in India. People from one part of the country started visiting other parts not only for their personal purposes but also visiting historical places and holy pilgrimage sites. This has culminated in what we call taking mass tourism on a large scale, and this also gave rise to what we call a particular agency or organization for organizing tours in India. These later day are called as travel agents or tour operators. And at the same time, invention of or introduction of airlines on Indian scenario gave rise to what we call outbound tourism or international tourism. Most of the students and elite class started visiting new countries for education purpose in the beginning. Later on, they have also started business outside the country, and business travel also became part of the tourism. This further contributed further growth of international travel and tourism. And to summarize the module, the beginning of travel can be traced from the ancient period, that is the prehistoric times, when man lived as hunter and gatherer inside the caves, started moving to another places or new places. That was the real beginning of travel. In the subsequent ages, people started visiting places not only for food collection but also for variety of purposes. The historical roots of tourism can be traced back almost to the origins of the civilization. Invention of money and development of trade beginning around 4000 BC marked the beginning of the modern era of travel. To cite as an example, most of the Indus Valley sites were connected to Mesopotamia or Egypt or China for travel purposes through seafaring only. Greeks traveled to the site of Olympic Games. This also gave a fillip to the development of travel during early centuries of pre-Christian era. During the Middle Ages, there was a growth of travel for religious purposes. Worldwide, this became a very significant activity for the people who want to visit holy places associated with holy personalities, thus gave rise to the mass tourism. During the 16th century, the growth in England's trade and commerce led to the rise of a new type of tourists. Those traveled to broaden their own experience and knowledge. During the 17th century, the British aristocracy traveled throughout Europe to improve their knowledge, subsequently began to visit the spa and seaside resorts in England. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the social and technological changes have had an immense impact on tourism. As a result, we can notice introduction of the cars, introduction of the flights, and expansion of railways in India furthered the growth of tourism in India in particular and in the world in general.